Cricket game in the jungle. Sunday morning right after church. Big crowd assemble. Donkey say me pass, I'm not it. No one does me. Come us in the behind the sun, is alright. I keep it wicked. Giraffe and kangaroo and fine leg. Snake run in the gully. On fire parrot in a tree. He said, alright fellas, are you ready? And the ones in the crowd start to sing very loud in the air and hit the ball down in the ball. All that time them and make it fall. Hook the man like a charan and put him straight in the stand. Yes, and they found time and pick up the ball. He said, I open the bullet. Monkey said, why the signs are you? You just say you hold it, you hold it. Then he got on the ball, half mile. And then he started running. You come in double like an express train. You hold plastic on the shaking. When you see elephant coming down, hold on, he start to shiver. Red and sit him a couple bites. He said, man, fat and fat stuff. And then he was in the car, start to sing. Let me love you, the ball down, hit the ball. Come back like him and make him fall. Hook the man like Vivian Richard and put him right on the yard. Lord, I'm coming up like a horse. He jump up high and build it up. He brought come down like a thunderbolt and bust it back into splinters. The great donkey, the great rapport, the great snake in the body. Lift down giraffe and kangaroo, I'm going to whisk you down to the monkey. Red and lion flat on the ground. He said, oh, that elephant crazy. He must be thinking he is falling from. Or the man from Rantina and big. Now anyone, pick it up, start to sing. Looking on in the hill and hit the ball down, beat the ball. Come out like him and make him fall. Hook the man like Brian Lara and put him out the pasture. Yeah. See adoration out on the field. Every man shot was hiding. Bravo, lion, like he be dead. Giraffe and kangaroo. But this time I pick up my eyes, say all the horse and straight. Every man that was on the wall is donkey come on again. Donkey go run and watch for. He say, Clara, shut your mouth. Your pass, I say, from inside the tree. No more of me ass, I out. And he told, and he said, don't give the great rapport, the great snake in the body. Lift down giraffe and kangaroo, I'm going to whisk you down to the monkey. Red and lion flat on the ground. He said, oh, that elephant crazy. He must be thinking he is falling from. Or the man from Rantina and big. Now anyone, pick it up, start to sing. Looking on in the hill and hit the ball down, beat the ball. Come out like him and make him fall. Hook the man like Brian Lara and put him out the pasture. Yeah. See adoration out on the field. Every mansion was hiding. Bravo, Lido, like he dead. She rap and kangaroo. But this time I come by and say all the horse and say. Everyone that was on the wall is done it over again. Don't be so wrong and watch for us. He said, Maria, shut your your past I say from inside the tree. No more me ass, I out. And he told, and he said, let me tell you, you're talking about him, man. But all your backside inside me stand. Send someone a jackass to back. This jackass finished with that.
This jackass finish with that. Oh, Dave Martins in the Trade Wednesday, Cricket in the Jungle. Good evening to all of you. Good evening to all of you. Welcome on a Tuesday night. We have young Elson Low here, and we are going to be dissecting, these words, dissecting that agreement that was signed by the GTU and the government, that 10% agreement. That's what we know it by. Elson Low, young economist, he's going to help us to dissect, unpack. He's going to take us behind the numbers. Did the teachers really get anything? We're going to be talking about that. Welcome to all of you who are joining us. Dave Martins, the Cricket in the Jungle. What I like about Calypso is that it's storytelling. And I think it's the greatest music in the world because the imagination. Now, imagine animals playing cricket. You first of all have to imagine you know cricket, and then you have to imagine these animals playing cricket. Which one of them at mid-on, which one bowling, which one. And that's what I'm saying is the greatest music because it's storytelling and imagination that goes into it. Imagine the jungle as a cricket ground. Beautiful music. That is why I'm glad I'm West Indian. That is why I'm glad I'm Guyanese. I identify. That's where identification comes from. That you identify with this music, the marvel of the rest of the world, the expression of a people in motion. Dave Martins, one of the greatest in the business, this past week, and we continue to celebrate him. A good evening to all of you. Good evening to all my Bostonian friends. Good evening to you, Mr. Turkey, the security chief, as we call him in Buxton. Good evening to you. Lynette, good evening to you. Good evening to brother from, is it block 6 or block 4 in Linden? It's one of those blocks. But block one of the blocks in Linden, block 6. No, block 22. I'm gonna get myself in trouble with Lindeners. Block 22 in the house. Good evening to all of you beautiful people from Linden, Wismar, Mackenzie. Well, let me say Region 10. Good evening to all of you. Cricket in the Jungle. Special request from one of my friends who is a regular on the program, Richard Munsami from Kildonan. One of my partners in Arizona, as we would say, one of my coolie partners. And this is what we love. I love about being Guyanese and being West Indian. If you don't call Richie Koulibaly, he get vexed with you. He get vexed with you. He said he's a bad Koulibaly. Good evening to you, Richie. If you are watching, you got your request. I know you made that request since Saturday. We had a good time on Saturday evening. One of our friends, his birthday, and we had a good time. Roger, happy birthday to you, Roger. Happy birthday to my brother George, who celebrated his birthday on Friday. Happy birthday to Roger. Happy birthday to Melissa Robertson. Melissa uncle is a regular here. Mr. Robertson from Georgia. Lots of birthdays. You know, these it was Virgo people, no? When you come over from August to September. I don't know the thing well, but good evening to all of you. Good evening to all of you. Happy birthday, Roger. Happy birthday, Melissa. Happy birthday to my brother George. Happy birthday to Sir McGarrell. I think his birthday is coming up in a couple of days. They're all. And all of you who have birthdays or have had birthdays, these birthday. Only we West Indians. Birthday. Happy birthday to all of you Virgonians. I didn't say Viragians, I said Virgonians. Good evening to you. We're going to be talking the talk tonight. We're going to be talking about that agreement that was signed by the teachers union, or a segment of the leadership of the teachers union, much to the chagrin of most of the teachers. In fact, all of the teachers I have talked to, all of them do not agree with the package. Good evening to all of you. Good evening. I see Auntie Brenda come out, put on her uniform, and she in class tonight. Auntie Brenda, good evening, and welcome to Politics 101. My auntie from Providence. Good evening. Good evening to you, Claire. John Jones is here, and John Jones don't make joke. John Jones is stuck up. He's a historian. You can tell. He said, we keep talking while Jack Dio and the crew walking the walk. So we've got to walk the walk. And, you got to talk before you walk. You got to talk before you walk. And talking could be walking, John. Because they don't want us to be silent. Sorry, they don't want us to talk. They prefer us to be silent. So it's not the talk, it's what you talk and how you talk. What you talk and how you talk. Carmen Bailey, good evening to you. Brenda Spencer, as always. Rhonda Spencer, all the Spencers are out tonight. Philip Albert Easton, good evening to you. Francine just get in trouble because Francine is them old-time WPA. Old-time WPA. She said, Mark Light, you're a traitor. You're a traitor. We will never forgive you. Francine is them old-time WPA. Revolutionary, Marxist, regionalist, black nationalist. She don't make fun, and she just gets in trouble with them because ideologically She got that thing. And that's one of the things with old WPA people. You know, they come out of that particular moment, you know, the 60s and the 70s. And they're grounded in that hardcore ideology. You know, when the Americans didn't want Jagan, you know, they didn't want Jagan in the PPP because they say they're communists, you know. And Burnham played that to his advantage. And you know, when the WPA come on the scene, Burnham, I think, got the sense that the Americans might have wanted to play some ball with the WPA. He said, they are the worst possible alternative. that chap wasn't 3 cents. He wasn't talking to Guyanese. I think I see Henry Jeffrey wrote it in his column this past week. And he was talking to the Americans. He said, if you all think you all going to move me now, that these bright boys and girls come on the scene, there was the Jagan, the worst possible alternative to me. Oh boy, our guys and Caribbean politics, little by long time, you say the story get melody, the story get melody, the story get melody. Our political story is really remarkable, remarkable, remarkable. You study the history of the political history of Guyana from the 40s to now. Real interesting, remarkable politics. Good evening to all of you. Ras Ricardo is out. My brother Vibert White from the East Bank. Sherry Robe. Sherry Robe. Good night. Good night, Sherry. Good evening, Sherry. Sherry's out. Sherry, Auntie Brenda is out. You can't behave bad because Auntie Brenda here tonight. So you got to behave yourself, Sherry. Wonderful people. I had a good time, Sherry. You know, always keep a little get together, and they would invite me and so on. Up there in the East Bank. Wonderful, wonderful. So let's talk tonight about this agreement. This agreement. Let's talk about this agreement because the government and the leader of the union are trying to tell us that you might get a 10%, that low, but the teachers really getting more than the 10% because they give you some allowance. They give them some allowance. And this allowance is really the meat. That's where the teachers are getting benefits. So no, don't look at the 10%, the allowance. Well, Clive Thomas taught me and taught us allowance can never be a substitute for wages. Allowance is what it is, allowance. Wages are permanent. That's what you work for. Allowance is a thing. They give you a thing. But I am not the economist. I have a young economist who's here and who is going to break this down for us. The teachers were asking for 39.5%. You give them 10%. That's criminal as far as I'm concerned. But you know, I'm an old WPA 1970s radical, they say. So don't worry with me. We get a young economist who's going to break it down. Good evening to you, Marlon Thomas. Miss the karaoke there. Must start it back, man. Must start it back. That used to be my Saturday night thing with my late partner, Ronald Wilbus. Very fun guy. Marlon, you must start back the karaoke. Flash Garden, you're here tonight. You say, Flash says allowance could always be taken away anytime. tell you, we got bright people in this class. Bright people. Good evening, Brother Asher. Good evening is good night. Asher is in England. Asher is in England. Good night to you, Asher. Buxtonian. He moved and tell me the story why he moved from Buxton and go to Canal over that side, cross the river. But he's a Buxtonian there in England. Good night. Good night to all of you. Let me bring in our guest. Mr.
Good night. Good night.
Good night. It's been a long time since I have had you on the show, but I've seen a lot of you over the last couple of months because there've been so much activity, political activity at Congress Place and other than I run into you all the time. And where I was, and I see you turn up with your sports car, and I said, wow, there you go. The young revolutionaries got it right. Back in the time when I was your age, we ain't studying car, we studying the revolution. And by the time you get old, you say, but I broke. I'm a broke revolutionary, right? And one of the things that old-time revolutionary teach the young revolutionaries, do not neglect your personal side. It's one of the things that we have learned. So when I see you with your sports car, I said, "Boy, if only I had sense when I was young, sports car like that." Winston Jordan is here. Wages are property and cannot. Here, the economist here. Wages are property and cannot be withdrawn. Allowances are discretionary. Only some allowances are non-taxable. Allowances are not considered in computing overtime rates, vacation allowance, pensions, and gratuity. Winston is a student at Clive Thomas. You, Elson, work with Clive Thomas. I am a protege of Clive Thomas. So all of we are Thomas people. So let me start you with Winston Jordan's comment there on allowances. Let's start there. Elson, what says thou about Winston's assertion? In fact, what I want you to do is to open up what Winston has said there.
Well, I think what he says is quite right in terms of allowances being discretionary, in terms of allowances not factoring into a lot of other calculations, and in terms of allowances not really giving you the kind of long-term security that you want to see as part of worker rights and as part of good worker relations and worker satisfaction. But what I really want to help Guyanese to understand, and this is where, as you said, we have to open things up. One guy needs to understand the way the PPP is thinking about this, and the reason that their thinking is the wrong kind of thinking. Essentially, what the PPP believes and is doing is that salaries to teachers and public servants more broadly should only really increase as the taxation and the tax revenue from the non-oil economy increases. That is essentially their position. Whereas, of course, the teachers and public servants more broadly, and Guyanese generally, are seeing an economy which is the fastest growing in the world, and which the government is getting millions of dollars of revenue, something like 250 to 300 million dollars of revenue every single month. That's US. And where the expectations, given additional oil production coming on stream, are very, very high, even for some of the years that are mentioned, the next year, the following year, and so on. Very high expectations. And of course, we're looking at a couple of the FPSOs coming online to bring us over 1 million barrels of daily oil production. Now, to me, on a base level, the idea that public servant pay and teacher pay in particular has nothing to do with the oil economy and the expansion of oil production and revenue is a wholly nonsensical stance to take. And it really indicates that what you're looking at with the PPP is a government that just doesn't understand the economy that it is faced with, just doesn't understand it. They continue to see teachers as an expense. So you can only cover them based on your tax revenue as an expense. Instead of understanding that right now the economy is being transformed and our education system at all levels must be used A, to provide the adequate personnel for the oil and gas industry and attendant industries, and B, to develop the non oil economy in such a way that it can keep up or that it can provide adequate jobs when compared to that oil economy. If they don't understand that, you'll come with all kinds of wild contradictions because, of course, it is quite odd to see teachers' unions say 25%, 30%, 35, 39% increases over various years, and for the government to respond with their starting position, 7%, 6%. It's almost as if there's a totally different conversation, right? Those numbers aren't even in the same ballpark. And so, as a result, what you're looking at is a government which has a totally different understanding of what's going on, a wrong headed understanding, and which doesn't really see teachers as an investment in the human capital accumulation of the country and education in the country. Now, what is the other side of that? That's where the inputs, we're talking about inputs, right? Wages and teachers and so on, inputs. The outputs is the other side. And whereas you're seeing the government refuse to give teachers reasonable salaries, this government for the past 3 years has had pass rates in the critical area of CSEC mathematics of 34%, 32%, and now 31%. The vast majority of Guyana students are not passing mathematics. Now, if you have an oil and gas, an economy with major oil and gas influence, and if you're looking to upskill and to build out your economy, people have higher wage jobs, ensure that you're able to fill out more industries, more technical personnel. How is it that we're going to have an economy where Guyanese struggle with mathematics, which is pretty fundamental for an entire range of careers? It's difficult to find a formal job in Guyana unless you have a pass in mathematics, much less if you need to go into engineering, oil and gas engineering, engineering in the construction industry, in manufacturing, with servicing of high-end machines and so on. So what you've got is a government which doesn't seem to really get that we cannot afford to continue like this. We have to invest in the teachers. We have to pay them properly. We have to train teachers. We have to look at the education system from primary, nursery, daycare, all the way up. We have to look at our tertiary institutions and properly fund and invest in them. And of course, oil and gas training institutions as well. They don't understand what's going on.
Elson, you don't go so fast. Your argument is that this attitude to wages for teachers is grounded in a school of thought that is embraced by the PPP. Essentially, that teachers and public servants are not productive workers. And so you don't invest in the same way. You invest in them in the same way as you invest in other workers.
Infrastructure and so on.
Infrastructure. They see that as productive, that you invest in a bridge, in a road, that would lead to investment, etc., 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 etc. What you are arguing is that the same logic can be used for investment in the teachers. Because teachers are producing your human capital.
Exactly.
Your human capital. They're producing your scientists.
Mhm.
They're producing your bridge builders,
Engineers.
your engineers. The
Mhm.
thing that you are investing, they have to produce them. And so they are productive workers. I just want to get that clear for our audience, to get what you say. You're moving a little too fast, right? And that's okay for Flash and them, because Flash understand economics. But for slow people like me, you go a little bit slow. So you are arguing that these are productive workers
Mhm.
because they are producing your human capital.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is so clear. And to me, what is shocking is that they don't seem to understand that there is an even more desperate need to invest in human capital now, given the rapid transformation of the economy due to the oil and gas industry and due to the changes brought about by having revenue flow through this economy. Whereas before, of course, we wanted to invest in education in order to develop the economy. Now, where you've got a lot of jobs in the oil and gas industry, a lot of jobs in high end manufacturing that we're looking to bring on board, you would need more urgently to invest in proper education. Instead, what you're hearing is ridiculous things like they want to bring in 100,000 foreign workers to fill the skills gaps. And I'm saying to myself, you mean to tell me that instead of focusing on critical subject areas like mathematics, instead of focusing your programs like GOAL and investing in the University of Ghana, which would like to expand significantly, your focus is to bring in people and to ignore the Guyanese that are right here and need that government investment? That is shocking. That is troubling. And that to me signals the direction that the PUP is looking to carry the country. As it stands right now, 80% of Guyanese, if you sit down and work, look it up, do not have a pass in mathematics and English. Many of them drop down. I think something like 40% of Guyanese drop out of high school. And then, of course, you have the vast majority do not pass mathematics. And so you end up with a society where the vast majority of people don't have that pass. Now, the PUP's plan, it seems to me, is to leave everything just like that. So they are spending nearly twice as much on education, but it's not on retraining people. It's not on vast night schools. It's not on a mass upskilling program. 50,000 people, as we speak about, we talk about 50,000 people getting a stipend of $50,000 a month to go and train, upskill, take back exams, bring themselves up to speed. That's not what they're talking about. They're talking about bringing in people and leaving Guyanese, leaving 80% of the population without the requisite skills.
Here, what I want you to do for me and my audience here, Elson. So, we have a problem of school dropout. We have a problem of literacy.
Mhm.
We have a problem of key subject areas, math
Mhm.
and English, where we are doing poorly.
Mhm.
That when you add illiteracy, the rate of illiteracy, the rate of school dropout, the poor performance in key subject areas, English and math, you're talking about a dysfunctional education system.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Make the case for us. Make the linkage for us between low remuneration for teachers and a dysfunctional education
Mhm.
system.
Mhm.
Make that linkage for us.
Well, studies have shown, I believe there was a study out of Baltimore which examined the effect of lower remuneration and, in particular, the effect of negotiations not being the strategy pursued, but imposition of salaries. And it demonstrated that it led to a loss of morale, which led to poor performance, which is unfortunate. But of course, our teachers will try their best, but they're struggling on the difficult conditions, the cost of living crisis, and they're trying to make ends meet. Now the point is, if you motivate teachers, if you compensate them accordingly, and if of course you tie that compensation to things like additional training, things like additional expectations of output, you would be heading in the right direction. And you would not anticipate increasing teacher salaries, training them more, and still getting 31% pass rates in mathematics. Your goal would be to improve that, and your goal would be to ensure that you have quality education across the board. So that's one part of it, and I think that that is got to be really the way to approach this, the way to have that focused approach. The second thing I'd say is when it comes to the dropout problem that we've got in Guyana, one of the things we've said in the opposition is that a lot of our cash grant programs, structured cash grant programs, whether it is going to be a child care cash grant, whether it is a salary top up where you get money on top of your monthly salary, those programs will be tied to your children attending school. So we will virtually eliminate school dropouts within the first couple of years, because you're not going to be able to get funds from the government unless your children are going to school. That's the first thing. The second thing I would say is we don't see it as enough that children are just going to school. We're saying that the system itself must be upgraded and reformed, and part of that is paying teachers appropriately, proper wages, so that the system functions and produces the type of workers that we want to see in our economy. It is vital that we are able to produce skilled workers and people with the base abilities to be able to help our economy to function. Alternatively, it looks like PvP doesn't care about all of that. They're just gonna bring in people,
Right.
and whatever happens to Guyanese happens to Guyanese.
Right. I don't want to get away from poor remuneration for teachers and its impact on the system. No. If you open your newspapers recently with the CSEC results, you will see that we got some of our children 20-something subjects and all of that. Now, if you get people passing 20-something subjects, even if it's 2%, 3% of the school population, that's some bright people. If we can get them to go into the teaching profession, that would upgrade the skill level, certainly at the level of intellect of teachers. But those children that got 20-something subject and going into teaching to earn $120,000, $100,000 a month, right?
Yeah, not at all. There's a lot to unpack there.
Yes, that's what I wanted to do.
The first thing I'd say is
yes,
it's not 2 to 3% of the population that's getting those grades. It's 0.02% or something like that.
There you go.
Because it's only a few students. However, what I would say is, on the one hand, I understand that many students will write a lot of subjects in order to try and get access to scholarships, whether it's the UE or so on. But what has happened, and this is why I call it a Priya special, because it is something that we saw on the Minister Manichan last time the PP was in office, where they would focus on students getting lots of passes and try to hide the fact that the typical student was not passing a wide variety of subjects, mathematics being the most severe area. And so, Queen's College typically, as an example, will get in excess of 90% pass rates in math. So in order for your national average to be at 31%, if Queen's College is getting 97% pass, you know what that means? It means many of the other schools are getting below 31% pass, 18%, 14%, which is, you have 100 students and only 14 people pass. I think to myself, how are they not morally outraged? But if these are citizens of Guyana, and you're not giving them a good education. You can't walk into a school with a straight face and know that when you look at these students, hardly anybody is going to pass. And you're comfortable with something like that? So they emphasize the students who have a lot of subjects. And they de-emphasize the fact that most schools in Guyana, hardly anybody is passing. That's the first half of it. The second half is that when it comes to compensation, there is the incentive factor, work ethic and incentive. But also, of course, we want to attract talent to teach. We want to attract people who are going to also propose ideas for the education system, conduct their own evaluations, and try to improve that system. That is, to me, also quite critical. And we've seen Guyanese teachers be recruited by Botswana and other countries by higher pay. What we in Guyana have to internalize is that we now have the resources to be that attractive place. And so, while on the one hand, we want to pay our teachers appropriately and train them, there's nothing wrong with us attracting skilled teachers from outside of the country once we are investing in, first and foremost, our existing teachers. So, that to me is one way to look at it. Overall, the goal must be to produce the type of quality education system that the nation requires. And one of the things I also want us to understand in Guyana is this. So, if you use a colloquial term, we're in the big leagues now. The country, on a per capita basis, when you adjust for prices, is 80,000 USD per capita is the GDP of this country adjusting for prices, which blows past almost every country in the world. We need to have an education system. We're like in a Norway or a Singapore or something, a wealthy country. Almost everybody does well on these exams. We cannot be aiming, oh, if we could only get 40% pass, that'd be great. Those days are over. We have to be looking now to get 80%, 90% pass rates in a variety of subjects because we have resources available. Again, I would point you to the fact that the government has nearly doubled the education budget. I think it's something like 80%, an increase of 80%. I have to check back that exact number, but it's a very significant increase. And the results, and I want Guyanese to really understand this, the results are worse. They're spending almost double the amount of money, and the results are worse.
Which means they're spending the money in the wrong place.
I don't know. It's such bad management.
Yes.
It's hard to spend twice as much money and produce worse results.
Because you're not spending it on wages, for example, which is going to motivate your teachers to give more attention to the students, and that will help to improve the performance.
Absolutely. They could have, first of all, paid the teachers well. Second of all, had night schools and lessons and additional classes to help students who needed some more. They could have looked at some of the levels that were coming to take exams in a year or two and give them additional attention. They're spending money, so money's available to do these things, but they're not doing them.
Elson, what is the importance of wages? Now, nowadays, Guyanese are literate in this economics thing. They know inflation good. They know cost of living good. They're crying about the inflation. They're crying about the cost of living. And there is an economic theory that says one of the best ways to tackle inflation and to tackle high cost of living is to increase wages. That's a school of thought. Comment on that, open up that for our audience.
Yeah, well, I will start off on a micro level and then I'll move to a macro level.
Yes.
The first thing to say is simply that teachers, given the productivity of our economy, given how much the amount of resources available, can be paid more than just a starvation wage. That's the first thing. We don't have to pay teachers a bare minimum wage. But I want to carry it further than that. I want to say that we should pay teachers as citizens of this country a good, nationally competitive wage. And then I want to take it one step further and say that given their role in the society, given their role in our desire to develop our non-oil economy, our desire to accumulate human capital, we should also compensate them to incentivize them. So above and beyond just being okay, just having a reasonable life, to incentivize them to put out their best works, do their own research, spend more time with the students, really incentivize them. That is one of the value propositions. That's something that's important for us to look at. And we, as given the nature of our economy, can afford that. Now, of course, the PDP tries to say, oh, inflation, or paying these teachers more will cause inflation and it won't work out, and all sorts of naysaying. First of all, we've demonstrated that when there were large salary increases, as on the coalition from 2015 to 2020, 77% increases at the lower end, large salary increases there was not a big inflationary pressure. Second of all, though,
Why?
Guyanese,
Why not? Why not?
well, one of the arguments there is that there was sufficient slack in the economy. There was
Mhm,
sufficient production to fill those gaps. But also, the reason for that was that the PPP was deliberately underpaying public servants for a prolonged period of time.
mhm,
And so it was kind of a catch-up game.
mhm,
You know,
mhm,
yeah, because public servants used to get 3%, 5%, minimal increases for many years. So it was a catch-up game. That's the first part of it. But that is one indication that you wouldn't see inflationary shocks. We're again gonna have to play a catch-up game because teachers are being underpaid again. But more than that, the economy is a very productive economy. It is
mhm.
growing, it is generating revenue, it is generating foreign currency, and therefore we have much more capacity. It's not that the government is going to need to print Guyana dollars and spread it around, which could be inflationary, but rather that the government has access to revenue. It's just a question of what share of the revenue you make use of for current expenses and so on. And how do you view that as an investment? And what share of the revenue you keep back as savings. Now, the PPP tries to paint themselves as, oh, we're prudent, we are thoughtful about the way that we approach money and finances, we're the ones who are not spending out the budget. But that is so absurd when you see them change the rules on the natural resources fund, the account that houses the oil monies, so that they could withdraw 98% of the money in there, which means essentially there's no natural resources fund. They're just withdrawing the money as it comes in after the year. They withdraw all the money and spend it. So they can't claim to somehow be prudent spenders if you're withdrawing all the money. The second thing to say is, if you spend that money in the construction industry and in infrastructure and so on, of course that's going to cause inflation. If you're spending a huge amount of money there, and so while on the one hand they're spending money, they don't seem to think inflation is a problem there. When you look at their measures, they say there's no inflation in construction whatsoever, which to me is false. Because, and if you talk to people in the construction industry, a simple thing like sand has had a sharp increase in price. Some people say sand is double what it was only a few years ago, and that's a critical input for infrastructure. So they use the inflation argument when it's convenient to them to use the
Mhm.
inflation argument. It's
Yeah.
not an argument that they really take seriously. Their inflation numbers are laughable numbers. And I think that is not something to pay attention to. The real question, and where I think we as Guyanese have to put our focus is, what is it that we want in terms of the output of our education system? What kinds of students do we want to produce? What kinds of skills do we want them to have? And how is it that we're going to use those skills to build our economy? That's the
Origin.
conversation to have. It's
Right.
not let's do the bare minimum conversation. It's
Mhm.
what are our goals? We
But
know
that has to rise from your vision for the society. And
exactly.
clearly, the PPP's vision is not consistent with our vision for the society. Now, let's zero in on the actual package.
Mhm.
So, first of all, I want you to give us a profile of teachers' wages. We are hearing that 50% of our teachers or more are earning $120,000 or less. Um, is that true? Give us a profile of of the wages that our teachers take home.
Yeah, well, it's long been something that teachers have complained about, that on the lower end, they're only earning around about $100,000. Of course, it has gone up a bit over the years, but it is still very minimal. And if you have certain certificates, you get a boost. If you have some seniority, you get a boost. I'm seeing them; they're indicating here that people who have master's degrees getting 22,000 more, and that people who have doctorates, higher level degrees, are getting $32,000 more.
What percentage of our teachers got masters and
Yeah,
PhD?
that would be a very small percentage. That'll be your senior mistresses and so on, that will have, and of course, doctoral degrees will be very, very few people. So I don't think those are particularly significant. But one thing I want to point out, let's say that you have a teacher whose base is 120,000. They're
Mhm.
going to get a master's. It's now 140,000. They're going to get a doctorate. It's now 170,000. There's no universe in which that is adequate compensation.
Right, right,
That's not even part of the conversation.
right.
These guys are so far from reality that even their best case scenario is not a serious. I mean, someone with a doctorate who is a teacher, I would think should be earning something internationally competitive, which is several $100,000. Not, I mean, a small something. Even if it was 300,000, I would say it is too small. I mean,
It's too small. I think a PhD gets about 300,000.
that's ridiculous.
Right, right,
You
right,
know,
right.
even if you're a senior mistress, headmaster, and you have a PhD, you should be earning something like that. So it's almost as if the PP's not even in this conversation.
Right, right. So the majority of our teachers are at the lower end. They don't
Yeah.
have masters, they don't have PhD. They basically they got a trained teacher certificate. Some of them get a
Mhm.
bachelor's degree.
Yeah, 7,000 and so on.
And so all right, good. So let's talk about 10%. Tell
Mhm.
us how this 10% is going to have a positive impact on the teacher's salary. 10% of 120,000 if you got a trained teacher certificate. 10% of 160 or 170,000 if you got a bachelor's degree. Tell us, Mr. Low, how so beneficial is that going to be to the teachers?
Well, the thing to note is if you look at the growth of Guyana over the last several years, you got 20% growth, 30% growth. I think there's one year at 40% growth, another year 25% growth. And you're now having ignored the teachers' demands to have several years looked at. I think it's from was it 2020 to 2023, something like that. Several years looked at. You've ignored all those years of growth where the country has revenue has gone up, oil revenue has gone up, where the national budget has tripled. You're ignoring all of that, and now you're gonna come to just with a little 10% increase. Now, while of course 10% is more money, it
How much
is
more money, Mr. Low?
well. I mean, I think you kind of pointed to it. 10% of our
I want to
salary.
hear from you. I am an economist.
I mean, it's just divide by 10. But the my point is, it's again like a minimal little something on top when your national budget is through the roof. And you heard Jack Deal say something ridiculous like teacher salaries from 2013 to 2023 went up 50%. But the national budget went up 418%. You know, it's not, I mean, even if they had double teacher salaries, it would still be way below the national budget. If they had kept pace, I mean, you know, a teacher's salary would be 418% more. Would be something like, I mean, 120,000 teacher would be earning nearly $400,000, somewhere along those lines, if they had kept pace, you know, with the growth of the national budget. And of course, you can look at the exact numbers there. But my point is, there, it's not as if there is some close relationship between the national budget and what teachers are being paid. They have actually gone out of their way to disengage salaries from the national budget, the size of the national budget.
Yes.
So you've got a disproportionate spending on things like infrastructure and capital spending, vast majority of the budget, and a small proportion spent on teachers, public servants, and so on.
So 10% of $120,000 is $12,000. By the time you tax that, by the time you link that to the rising cost of living, the teachers really carrying home zero.
Well, one of the things to really note is that the government does not want to acknowledge the inflationary problem we've had in this country for several years.
Yes.
Last year, one of the things I had done at the beginning of the year is calculated an expected inflation of 7% based on the increase in the money supply. The government said, oh, 2% inflation last year, which is basically no inflation. The IMF indicated 4.5%. US government indicated 6.6% inflation. So there was very significant inflation. In particular, in Guyana, food inflation has been double digit for multiple years, 10%, 14%. This year is looking like 8% so far from the latest reports. Food inflation, of course, impacts lower income people disproportionately because lower income people spend a greater proportion of their budget on food items, and that's something that is widely studied. So, as a result of that, the inflationary pressure, the cost of living pressure on teachers has been significant, and the salary top up is not particularly significant given the inflationary pressure. In fact, in the year in which there was a 6.6% increase in 6.6 inflation rate, percent inflation rate, and a 6.5% public servant salary increase, which is last year, you could argue that salaries actually shrunk on a real basis.
In real
People's
basis,
purchasing
yes.
power shrunk, you know?
Yes. Let's go. So the 10% is nothing when you factor in inflation and so on. Really, that 10% is really zero. They got nothing there. The teachers are
Minimal.
taking on minimal. So they say that the salary upgrades for non-graduate teachers will receive a salary upgrade to the midpoint of their salary scale after 3 years of continuous service. An application process will be initiated following the signing of the agreement. My brother, that sounds nice. Upgrade in your salary. Tell us what it really means.
Yeah, well, what they're trying to do is to provide, I would say, a staggered approach where you can get a little bit more with A, time, and B, a little bit more qualifications and so on. So they're trying to provide that kind of a mechanism. But the debunching, the upgrades are so minimal that is it really an incentive for people to spend years teaching, for people to go and get further study, 7,000 for a certificate? I mean, very minimal. And so I think that is a disincentive, or not an incentive for teachers to go and pursue further training. Rather, we want it should be the other way around. We should be rewarding teachers substantially for receiving additional training. But that approach is a cost driven approach. They're looking at what does it cost? They're looking at, all right, this is an expense. They're not looking at what is the return that I get from a teacher having more capabilities, qualifications. What is the return I get from a student spending an additional year studying under these teachers with more qualifications and so on? And of course, these things have been studied by the Brookings Institute. You've got studies out of Berkeley University which talk about the increase in earnings potential of people with each additional year of learning. And one of the things we really want to emphasize is the adoption of technology and research and development that comes from people having more education. Guyana, the IDB, has on more than one occasion flagged Guyana as being one of the countries with the worst levels, or the second worst level, of technological adoption in the entire Caribbean and Latin America region. Now, if you're not adopting technology, of course your GDP is not going to be growing substantially. Of course, your country is not going to be generating high-paying jobs. So we in the opposition have a major focus on technological adoption. We talk about a productivity-oriented development bank that will lend money so companies can adopt new technologies, upgrade factories, improve production processes, generate higher-paying jobs. But there's no point in us spending money and investing money in more technology if we're not producing graduates who can
Right.
use technology.
So the salary upgrades, minimal. Annual health screenings. This one make a laugh. As we were saying, Guyana, me belly hurt me. The ministry, in collaboration with the Ministry of Health and the GTU, will coordinate annual health screenings for teachers regionally. My goodness. The Ministry of Health, we should be doing health screenings for all citizens, include teachers. Oh, this is something special for teachers. Talk to me, Elson.
Yeah. That's just a smoke screen, man.
Yeah.
That's a smoke screen. One of the things we have said is going to be a part of our health policy is we're going to be having comprehensive and regular annual health screenings for citizens. We will incentivize it as part of our cash grant program because we know that there is a return to um, picking up problems early, primary health care. We know that if we can catch something and treat it early, it is much cheaper to do so than to have people end up in the emergency room. And of course, we want to save citizens' lives as much as possible and ensure that they don't miss work, they're productive, and they're happy. So that is to us top line an approach to governance.
But
They
you're not
see it
what they're
as
doing
kind of
here.
a gimmick.
They're saying there's some special thing they're doing for teachers.
They
The
see it
fact,
as a gimmick.
right. The fact of the matter is that you ought to be doing this routinely
Yeah,
for all citizens. So
yeah.
minimal, nothing. Number three. Number four, improve qualification allowances. Increased non-taxable allowances will be provided based on education qualifications, ranging from
Well,
$5,000
that's what we discussed. Yeah.
for a certificate education management to $32,000 for doctorate degree, effective September 1. So if you get a doctorate degree, like Mr. Light and a few other people, you're getting $32,000 allowance, right? Now, $32,000, as I understand it, is 150 US dollars. It's not much. But if you get a PhD, and very few teachers get a PhD, you get 32. If you don't have a PhD, you get a teacher certificate, you get $5,000. So even the little bit that they're giving for allowance, the majority of teachers will be just getting a $5,000. Talk to me, Mr. Low.
Yeah, well, that to me reflects a government that has not sat down and looked at the value added that comes from teachers having these certificates and that kind of training. Um, I would say also that there is a reluctance to even engage with data because what you should be doing is looking at the performance of teachers, looking at the various certificates, and rewarding them in proportion to how that helps teachers to perform better. And you can inform that research and so on and so forth. That's the approach that we believe needs to be taken. That's not the approach that they're taking. And therefore, as people are productive, you want to compensate them more. That to me is really it works hand in
Right,
hand. But that's a conversation to have, which can be very detailed, and of course, we'll engage with teachers to get their perspective. But that's not even a conversation that's being had. I mean, do they have a way of determining that a doctorate relative to a teacher certificate makes you, I don't know, 4 or 5 times more productive or anything like that? Do
right,
they have
right,
any kind of
right.
measure of that, or is it just I'm getting them a little extra
Give
something,
them a little freck.
a little freck. You
Closing
know?
allowance, an annual closing allowance of $15,000. Annual,
Yeah.
annual, not a monthly, not a monthly, annual.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
12
yeah.
months of the year, you're getting $15,000. That is what? $1,000 and a little change? Huh?
Yeah, yeah. I guess yeah, buy a shoe or something. I mean, I don't know.
Duty-free concessions. Teachers will benefit from 150 duty-free concessions annually for vehicles, all terrain, and so on and so forth. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I mean, the duty free concessions issue is one where they try to use it as a bit of a carrot. But we believe that that is something that has to be
Tell us
extended.
how it works. Tell us how it works. I,
Yeah.
I used to believe that the duty-free was to the top of the line teachers. Are they not
Um,
saying all teachers will get duty-free?
I think you just said 150 teachers, didn't you?
150.
Yeah, well, was it 15,000 teachers or 14,000 teachers or something to that effect? So 150. No, we believe that has to be a much broader policy in terms of giving teachers access to
Yes, yes,
transport.
yes. We know where you stand in the opposition.
150
But
is, I mean,
it's nothing.
yeah, I
It's
mean,
nothing. Let's go to 7 scholarship, 100 scholarship annually. How many teachers? You said Law,
I 14, 15,000, I think is one of the numbers that has been cited.
right? And they're giving 100 scholarship annually. Speaks for itself. Hinterland benefits.
Yeah, I think that's 30 something $1,000 there. That is an incentive for hinterland teachers. But what we have to note is that the inflation is most severe in hinterland areas because there's additional transportation costs. So, a bag of bread is not going to cost the same in Georgetown as it might in Linden and so on. So there's desperate need for teachers to be compensated even better in those areas. That is again just kind of a minimal addition on the salary. I think the concept is good. That is to say that those who need some more compensation because of higher inflationary pressures, higher cost of living pressures, should be given that incentive. But the amount is one question. The other thing I would say is when you look at hinterland, the hinterland region, we've got a situation where the greatest education gains can be made in the hinterland region because that's where the most you have the lowest scores. We've had years where virtually no Amerindian student has gotten a 1 in mathematics and so on. That's something that's been highlighted. And so you would want to disproportionately incentivize teachers above and beyond the cost of living question to be in the hinterland area, good teachers, to ensure that we can get those scores up. Because, of course, if you're hardly having anyone passing and a teacher comes in and you have a lot of people passing, that's a very significant improvement that you can have. Um, the way that the PP talks about this is, oh, we build in schools and so on. But building schools is not the only metric for performance. And in fact, if you look at our pass rates and so on for our time in office with far smaller budgets, our education, our pass rate in math and so on was 10% higher on, or thereabouts for a couple of years, so much better performance
So,
with far smaller
Elson,
budgets.
when we look at this package in its totality, 10% and these allowances, are teachers taking home more money?
Well, they're taking home literally more, but it is a package which I would say is just based on delusional thinking. I think
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But what I want you to do, I know they're delusional, but what I want you to tell our audience, because they're saying, the PPP is saying, look, 10% plus all these allowances, the teachers will be better off. Some or the other, they will get more money to go and buy things in the market. Um, they're going to be better off. Is that true?
uh, what I would say is this: if I give you $10 more, a literal $10, I already have $10,
Right.
but that is not meaningful. This is not a meaningful improvement in teachers' compensation. It is not a meaningful
Can you
improvement.
give me $10 in the cost of living Ghana by
The
$40?
cost of living, but also, man, what $10 gonna do? You know? And that really is the way that I think teachers, because of course we've seen already a lot of outrage from teachers. That is what you're looking at here is a feeling that what is this gonna do? I don't think the teachers at all anticipated when they were striking that first of all, several years would be disregarded. And second of all, when they did come with a number, the number would be such a ridiculous number. If you were thinking about this number as having to compensate teachers for the three, I think it's 3 other years that they wanted to be considered, you have to ask,
2019, 2020, 21,
oh,
22,
it's more than
23,
3 years, 5 years.
5 years.
Yeah, 5 years. So you're looking at, was it 3-4% per annum additional, when you break it down. That's brutal. That's brutal. Absolutely brutal. So yeah, it's $10 more is $10 more, but it's not a meaningful improvement for teachers.
In real terms, the teachers
It's not a
have
meaningful.
gotten nothing out of this deal. At best, the teachers at the higher level, the higher salary scale, those with masters and PhD, there are few of them, they may get a little bit more, but the majority of teachers who either have a teacher certificate or a bachelor's degree, when you add the allowances and the 10%, their increase is minimal, minimal, minimal. So there we have it, Brother Elson. Really, the teachers have gotten nothing out of this. At a minimum, I would say any serious government should be aiming. I've put something on the screen there by Mia, who said she taught in St. Lucia and she is telling you what they earn there and so on. At a minimum, any serious government, any serious union would be saying, let us bring our teachers' remuneration to par with our CARICOM partners. Let our teachers earn as much as teachers in the CARICOM region earn. One, there will then be a disincentive to move from Guyana to the Bahamas because the money is the same. And you would rather stay home with your family than go to work somewhere else. The money is the same. Do you agree with that?
Well, listen, teachers in Guyana should be earning far more than teachers across the Caribbean. Guyana is not comparable to the Caribbean when it comes to the nature of our economy.
Right.
Let me repeat something because it's important Guyanese hear this number. Adjusting for prices. The IMF has said the per capita GDP income per person in Guyana, when you look at it broadly, is 80,000 US per person. 80,000 US. The Caribbean is not even in the conversation anymore. You're talking about Norway, you're talking about Sweden, you're talking about Finland, you're talking about Singapore. We cannot allow the people to try and sell us this lie that it is a poor country and you can only give people a little something. That is a lie. And you know, one of the things that we got to hold them accountable over. Look at the size of the national budget. It's not that they're not spending money. They're spending 3 times as much as only a couple of years ago. They're spending 418% more than in 2015. There's money. They're just not spending it on the areas that they don't feel are important, and they don't feel teachers are important. That is the tragedy. There's more than enough money. There's money spent. So if they decided to spend money, they just decided not to spend on teachers and the education system's
An
performance.
education system, and you are not responsible for what I'm going to say now, but I have to say it. If your philosophical thinking is that teachers are not important enough to spend money on, to spend on wages, to spend on upgrading their skills, you are affecting your policy, your thinking is having a negative effect on women because the teaching profession is mainly women. I understand that over 90% of the teachers are women. You're having a negative effect on African people because more than 75% of the teachers are African Guyanese. Teachers live in communities. If they don't carry home wages, enough money, then there's not enough money to circulate in their communities. Their communities will remain depressed over a period of time because there's not much money circulating in their communities. You are multiplying low wages in the communities that teachers live. At the end of the day, your thinking and your policy is having effect beyond the education system. In our multi-ethnic society, in our society where the wages of women are depressed, women doing watchman work, women doing teacher work, and those areas are not paying money. And these women, a lot of time their salaries are not supplemental to the family. Their salaries and wages are what running the family. The effect of low wages on teachers and public servants have consequences beyond the public service and the education system. Elson Low, you can comment on that, but you don't have to, because that's taking us in murky waters. But not murky waters, because there's nothing murky about that. Take us into unstable waters.
One thing that I think is so important for Guyana as we move forward is that there's a pernicious and problematic zero sum thinking that the PUP has adopted.
Yes.
It is either us or them. It is either people of Indian descent or people of African descent, that kind of a dynamic. And the teaching profession is a classic example
Yes.
of where it is not zero sum. It is not only Guyanese of African descent that go to school. It is not only Guyanese of Indian descent that go to school. It is all Guyanese that have to pass through the education system. And
Yes.
so there's a synthesis, there's a synergy if you're going to be willing to invest in areas, even if it may benefit directly some Guyanese of African descent, but it benefits the society and the economy as a whole.
Yes, and we started the program with the philosophical thinking of the government.
It is highly problematic. And
that's where the problem begins.
It makes the economy underperform. It makes people's lives much less happy and prosperous as it could be. It is so problematic. And this is a great example where the returns, the benefits are clear, and where that kind of zero sum thinking, us versus them, they can't get money because of whatever discriminatory agenda, is, just holding the whole country back.
Elson Low here tonight breaking down this agreement that's signed by the teachers and the union. The conclusion is obvious, but we had to break it down. We have to break it down. Really, the teachers have gotten little or no benefit from this package. Elson, your closing thoughts.
Thank you very much. Listen, I think, again, what we as a nation must be focused on, and where we need to, in our minds, push the PUP to one side, see them as not even people to be taken seriously at the next election. What we need to be focused on is the direction of travel for our country in terms of improving our economy, our people, and the people's lives. We cannot be stuck in the PUP's politics of bare minimum, the PUP's politics of starvation budgets, the PUP's politics of discrimination, and the PUP's politics of divisive and limiting thinking. We have to look at the opportunities that are there, at the direction that this country can go, at the revenues, the resources, the things that are available to us now to really move our country forward. And say, man, these guys are a non-entity. These guys are not to be even considered. We got to move past the PUPs even being part of this conversation and talk about, one, the ideas, of course, the APNU is putting forward, the opposition is putting forward, but two, what we as citizens want to see from our education system, from our economy, and from our society going forward. That's a constructive conversation that I think that I want to be a part of, you want to be a part of, and right-thinking Guyanese want to be a part of. The PUP, with their nonsensical approach, need to be kicked to the curb, and we need to let this country breathe and grow and develop even in something as interesting and as important as the way we think about our future. And so the starvation bare minimum approach, man, that's gotta go the way the highway.
It's got to go the way. Elson, thank you very much for coming on to the program tonight. And as usual, bringing light, bringing facts, bringing analysis and perspective to our discourse. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
And to you, our audience, thank you all for staying with us. Of course, the news is not so good because all of us know a teacher, two teachers, three teachers. And this package is really an insult to our teachers. It is all the more reason why we have to take power in Guyana. All the more reason. The PPP clearly is not going to change their ways. We have got to take power. And if my party, our party, the Working People's Alliance, if it is part of the new government, the first thing we will do is call the teachers in, the union in, and say your 39% that you're asking for the next 3 years, here is it. You got it. First thing we will do is to give them what they've requested. We feel they deserve more. And so the next thing we will do is to engage the union in raising teachers' salary to the level of our sister CARICOM countries at the minimum. Engage them in raising teachers' salaries to the level of our sister CARICOM countries at a minimum. So we give them what they're asking for, and then we work with the union to raise the salary to CARICOM levels. Because we feel if we do that, we'll be stemming the tide of outward movement of our teachers. We will be making our teachers happy. We will be in a position to demand more from our teachers because we are paying them more. And then, as you know, you all know, the WPA is big on a universal basic income that all Guyanese, once they reach the age, the working age, will get a basic income. A basic income. So your wages cannot go below that basic income. So again, we give the teachers what they're asking for. That will not vastly improve their situation. So we go one step forward, further. And that is, we work with them to bring their salaries up to where it is in the Bahamas and St. Lucia and those other places. As Elson said, they deserve more because our economy is stronger and we could pay them more, but at a minimum, we bring them up to that level. And then, as we say, we have enough to pay a universal basic income. Basic income that all Guyanese would have. We've got to be upfront. Yes, there is theory, but there is also practice. Our teachers deserve more with little. Can you imagine if our teachers were to turn off, to switch off, what our country would look like? With the best efforts of our teachers, the output of our children is low. High dropout rate, high literacy rate, low passes in English and math. If our teachers were to decide to switch off What will happen? What will happen? We have to take power. It is the only way that we are going to stop this confounded nonsense. Everybody is quite rightly saying we're talking. Well, when you're in the opposition, that's all you can do, talk. You can take some extra parliamentary action to go along with your talk. And many of you are debating whether, in fact, we are doing the right thing by not taking extra parliamentary action. The teachers took extra parliamentary action. They went on to the streets. At the end of the day, their union betrayed them. Their union betrayed them, or part of their union leadership betrayed them. That doesn't mean that extra parliamentary action is not needed. But in the end, the action that is most needed is to take power. We have to take power. We have to take power. Or else we dead. We are dying already. We have to take power. We have to organize to take power. We have to agitate to take power. Because taking power is not going to be easy. We've got to get a voting machinery, an electoral machinery that will give us an equal chance of getting power. And then we've got to get you all to vote, to vote, to vote, to vote, and to vote them out as a start. And we hope that our political leaders are paying attention to what's going on now, so that when we take power, they don't go to the teachers and say, we're giving you, the other one, they give you 10%, we're going to give you 15, or we're going to give you 20. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. We in the Working People's Alliance, we are saying we will urge whatever government we are part of, we will fight in the government. And this is not just an empty promise, it's a conviction. The teachers will get that 40% they're asking for. And that is not going to be enough. We are committed to raising their salaries to the level of their CARICOM counterparts at a minimum, because that is a minimum. Education is what gets all the way where we then know. Whether it was the Carnegie you go or the home economics you do that teach you for cook, and you're a caterer today, is because of education. If you're a carpenter, a painter, you got to know measurement. You're able to do that because of an education. And don't talk about those of us who are doctors and lawyers and so on. All of us have benefited from education. And this government that is downplaying education is not just a school of thought. It is part and parcel of the grand design for our society. And the grand design for our society is domination. And part of the way you dominate people is you uneducate and miseducate them. The PPP wants an uneducated society, because an uneducated society is an easier society to fool, is an easier society to dominate. because you're messing with their minds. When you uneducate the society, you immobilize the society. And you don't care if they become criminals because you have the money to either kill the criminals or guard yourself from the criminals. It is we, the ordinary people, who will be the subject of the deviance that an uneducated society shows up. The PPP has a grand plan for Guyana. And the grand plan is to uneducate our society so it can dominate the society. You see what it's doing to our little black boys and girls? You go into Tiger Bay, you go into Albistown, and you give them a contract for $2 million. And they say, thank you, because $2 million to them is a big deal. But you're giving 200 times that to the people you favor. But because our young people are not woke, are not conscious, they think you are doing them a favor. You're now telling them, mix up sand and make concrete road. That's the way we are accommodating you. Make concrete road. You all see the concrete road in Guyana. And you're saying that's the way you're empowering them. You're disempowering them. At the end of the day, that $2 million, they smile. But by the time they don't buy the material from you people, they ain't carrying no much to their family. You're playing on the lack of education in our society. The grand plan of the PPP is to uneducate our society. And those who are more vulnerable will reap the grim rewards of that grand plan. We've got to take power. We've got to take power. And we have to start to socialize our leaders that power is not something you play with. Because the repair that will have to be done to poor people, the repair that will have to be done to black people, the repair that will have to be done to poor people of all races is enormous. And we are not, and I'm telling you all, do not take anything from your leaders who say they're to give you 10%, we're going to give you 20%. Power is important. And as I said last night, we have to start a new thinking about power. I will never advocate taking away anything from anybody. Indian people don't have to fear black people taking away their thing. Not under my watch or people like me. This is not about poor people taking away from the rich. This is not about black people and Amerindian people taking away from Indian people. It's about giving African people and Amerindian people their due so they can get to the level of Indian people. It is giving the poor their just reward so that the gap between the rich and the poor will be decreased. All of us will not be rich, super rich. We know that. But we can get rid of poverty. And if we can get rid of poverty, If we get rid of poverty, we open up possibilities that were not there before. I hear people say there are opportunities in the society. What opportunities are you talking about? A $2 million contract where you demand that I must go vote for the PPP, I must go shoot down my brother, and I must take that 2 million and spend it back upon your people, your business people, and I carry home $250,000 to my family. What opportunities? There is such a thing as equality of opportunity. If one group gets opportunity up here, the other group must get the same opportunity. All of us can get opportunity. But if there's not equality of opportunity, that's discrimination. And in order to take advantage of opportunities, you have to have condition. Is there equality of condition? Are our various groups in the society equipped with the wherewithal to take advantage of big contracts? No, no. Some groups have accumulated wealth, and some groups have no accumulated wealth. And so there's no equality of condition. So the first thing any serious government must do is to bring those who are at the bottom, bring them up so the conditions are equal. So that the opportunities can be taken, advantage can be taken of the opportunities. Equality of conditions, equality of opportunities will more likely lead to equality of outcomes. There's no equality of condition. There's no equality of opportunity in Guyana. There are opportunities, but not equality of opportunity. Some people are big contractors today. They never went to business school. You're telling our people, oh, you gotta go to business school to be a contractor. There's nowhere in the world, in human history, that groups have been empowered on their own. The reason we have government there is to empower people. You take that from somebody who study and teach politics. Government was not created for joke. Government was created to mediate conflicts in society. Government was created to save us from ourselves. Government was created to promote equality and equity. This nonsense you hear that government is not there to do anything. Government is there to look after the welfare of all its people. And that is why we have to take governmental power, so that we can create equity and equality in our society. The PPP is bent on destroying sections of our society to satisfy its grand plan. There's a reason they repeat Burnham's name at every twist and turn. Burnham is their whipping boy. They whip Burnham to say to Indians, he is the devil. And those people who look like him, they have to be the object and the subject of our revenge. The grand narrative African people cannot govern. How do we know that? Look at Burnham. He destroyed Guyana. He did nothing. He left Guyana as a basket case. That is what they tell their people. It's not just about Burnham. It's that they use Burnham to say that black people cannot manage a country. Black leaders have to understand that. We are at a pivotal point in our country's history. Certain things are being revealed, revelation time. And some of our leaders don't want to talk about those revelations. But I'm going to talk about them. The PPP's grand plan is not to throw black people into the sea or to send us back to Africa. That they know that that's impossible. Their grand plan is to keep us here, but to keep us in our places, to keep us ignorant and stupid. When I say on this program that my auntie sent me to school, it angers some of the Indianist elites because they don't want black people to hear about school. They want us to whine and dance for them. We are whiners and dancers. They're okay with us doing that. They're okay with us doing that. They do not want us to take education. They do not want us to own businesses. You go around African communities in Guyana, everybody's selling something, hustling a little something, yet we hear the nonsense that black people lazy, they don't want to do business, they can't do business. There's what we call the BK phenomenon in Guyana. BK had a small truck, I understand, one lorry, one truck. And government intervened to make the BKs of Guyana big contractors. They didn't give the BKs of Guyana $2 million contract, or else they wouldn't be where they know. If I have anything to do with government, I'm operating from the philosophy that government is there to lift up people, to facilitate it. Not just indirectly, but directly. That's why direct cash transfers are part of the WPA's philosophy. What a wonderful day it would be when all them lady who at the corner selling the little plantain chip and chicken foot and so on can be upgraded from the little tray to snackets. I've been to Cuba. Cuba is a socialist country. They say socialism don't like business. I've been to a few countries. Very few countries, if any, I see small business like I see in Cuba. Every street you go in Cuba, a little cook shop, small business. You hardly see people with tray. And that's where we have to move our people from little tray and turn them into entrepreneurs. This government got to do that. Government got to do it. The PPP is not about to do that. We have to take power and do it. But our leaders have to undergo a philosophical change, changing their thinking. We have to forgive our leaders for their transgressions in the past in order to take power. But in the process of forgiving, we have to re-socialize them. And for us to re-socialize them, we have to re-socialize ourselves, our own thinking. We are on a mission. Teachers, y'all aren't getting nothing more from this government. You fight and they move it from 6 to 10. You have to continue fighting though. But your fight has to be more than just a fight for wages. It has to be a fight to get yourself out of poverty and to create the conditions so that you can live like other teachers in Grenada and St. Lucia and Barbados and other places. That's what the fight is about. And that includes removing this government. Removing this government. We are on a mission. I'll see you all tomorrow night, same time, when we continue this struggle, because we are in a struggle. We are preparing ourselves for battle. Final battle. To take power again. That's where we're going.